Story that's really starting to build towards the weekend. Saints spray, and it touches on what we've been talking about Monday and Tuesday night here. Lyon braces for fan fury. How will the Saints go with Ross Lyon? Lyon has been the architect of Fremantle's destruction in his time at St Kilda. They've won 8 in a row against them, the Saints, over the Dockers. I know on Monday night you said this was more of a media story than it is a football story.
I'm wrong there.
Yeah, and I'm wrong. Last night, when you said to me how the Saints fans react, I must admit I hadn't really thought about it. I thought, oh, it's a while, everybody's moved on.
You're a good-hearted person. You don't see the bad in people.
It's going to be ugly.
I suspect that when I was reminded tonight the game starts at 10 to 8, everyone knocks off work at 4 o'clock on a Friday. That's 4 hours drinking alcohol before they waltz down to Etihad Stadium. God almighty, I don't know what's going to happen.
It could boil. Wait till we show you the tweets when David King and Chris Grant are here. We'll show you the feedback we had last night from St Kilda people. Tanya Armstrong's in the Perth newsroom for Fox Sports News. Tanya, welcome to AFL 360.
How you going, guys?
Give us a sense of the build-up in Perth as the Dockers are in the air, flying east.
Yeah, well, I was at the airport today with the Fremantle Dockers flying out, and you can never say there's an air of confidence about the Dockers when they're getting on a plane to Melbourne. I think they've won 3 of their last 28 in Melbourne, which is a terrible record. Ross Lyon was surprised to hear that statistic. They've lost their last 6 in Melbourne. Hayden Ballantyne is on the plane just to add some spite to the Friday night clash, and he said he'll fight fire with fire if any St Kilda players target him. Lachie Neale is a chance to make his debut, but the big talking point, of course, is Ross Lyon going back to St Kilda for the first time since leaving the club. He was making jokes about it. I think he seems a little bemused by all the attention that it's getting, but he does admit, sure, it's a talking point, but he's very relaxed and was actually having a bit of a laugh and a joke.
All right, let's have a look at the interview that you did with Ross Lyon before they took off.
Well, I certainly haven't been thinking about it all week. I think that's a moot point. I've been asked a lot about it. Clearly, there's some interest. A lot of people have moved on, going over as a Fremantle coach, you know, to try and beat an elite Melbourne-based club and team. So that's where it sits.
Does it worry you? You're expected to...
Do I look worried?
You're expected to receive some abuse from some fans?
I've been a cop of abuse for the last 5 years as a senior coach, so you can't please everyone all the time. And look, I'll control what I can, you know. I've certainly got a lot of friends there that I worked, in particular the players that I worked really hard with to try and achieve a result. Ultimately fell short. They're doing wonderful things at the moment. They're clearly in form on the top of the ground. Their best players are available and playing incredibly well. We go over full of confidence. We've had some really intense games against Geelong and Sydney in particular. We're getting availability with Mundy back and Ballantyne back, and Fife is trained fully today, so we expect him to play as long as the surgeon in Melbourne ticks him off, that he won't potentially risk his long-term future. So in that context, Etihad's going to be full. It's going to be we want it to be a great game. We've been involved in a couple of rippers already. The Geelong game was incredible. The Sydney come from behind and almost get it done. So, yeah, it's great to be on the Friday night stage. You know, beaming back into Perth. I think it's 5:40 live, and you know the footy world's tuning in, and we aim to stand up.
About coaching against your former players, is that a big advantage?
Oh, look, it's all conjecture from here, isn't it? I certainly know what they're capable of, and at their very best, it can be a daunting task. You know, our job's to play our style of footy and make them react to us a little bit. And you know, do you double team Nick Riewoldt? Do you tag Hayes, Dalsano, Goddard? You know, who do you match up on Milne? How do you control Sam Fisher? You know, all those types of things are running through. But at the end of the day, we've got to get our hands on the footy. We've got to pressure the opposition, and we've got to use it well, and that will give us our best chance.
Tanya, how has Fremantle supporters embraced Ross, and how is the relationship between Ross and the football media?
So far, so good, Robbo. It was a pretty bad start back in September, but 7 long months ago since that first press conference when he was appointed coach, it was a pretty hostile reception. Some tough questions had to be asked, and he thought it actually went pretty well. He came back a week later and did some one-on-ones with the media, and he's slowly getting to know people. He's been very accommodating. Pre-match, he's been very open and honest. He tells you who's going to play, who's not going to play. the only thing is, last week he said he didn't rate closed sessions, and this week he's closed all the training sessions. So we got a bit of a beef about that. But in terms of Fremantle fans, I think they've moved on from Mark Harvey. You saw last week they gave him a standing ovation, but they're right behind Ross Lyon now, and he spoke to them first in November at an annual general meeting, and he pretty much had the meeting out of the palm of his hand.
Can you shed any light on the Nathan Fyfe situation? We all really admire him as a footballer. Obviously, he's got a tremendous amount of courage. He played with a similar injury all last year. Do you suspect that he'll come to Melbourne and be ruled out and have an operation, or do you think, talking to the people over there, that he'll just soldier on and play with it?
Well, we spoke to Nat Fyfe as he got on the plane. He arrived at the airport with Ross Lyon. He said, I feel good, I want to play. So he just needs to see a surgeon tomorrow who backs him up. He, of course, had that left shoulder reconstructed over summer. He played 21 matches last year with it and went very close to winning the best and fairest. So he thinks no reason I can't play another full season with this injury. I guess it just comes down to if he injures it again, he will have to have surgery. But I think he's willing to roll the dice, and so is Ross Lyon.
Well, he had a reconstruction and it survived 2 games of football. So I think he's going to have a long-term concern with his shoulder.
Yeah, well, certainly it doesn't look good, does it? But he did train fully today. He doesn't have full movement. Ross Lyon admitted that. He won't be 100%, but maybe Nat Fyfe, 99% isn't too bad going forward. They won't risk his long-term future, though, so it all comes down to what the surgeon says tomorrow.
OK, let's stay with you, Tanya, and talk about the Eagles, who have the big test of their season, certainly in the early stages. They've taken advantage of the benefit.
Categorically not. Former Western Bulldogs coach Rodney Eden is in fact Ross Lyon. He has told the St Kilda Football Club today that he will not be coaching in 2012.
Lyon had told his management to get a deal done at St Kilda, then, without their knowledge, struck his own at Fremantle. A deeply wounded Mark Harvey has been knifed in the back.
The St Kilda Football Club has been rocked by the shock departure of coach Ross Lyon. Signing for 4 years, he's been headhunted by the Fremantle Dockers after the axing of Mark Harvey.
A baptism of fire for Ross Lyon, who's copped a media roasting after his confirmation as Fremantle's new coach.
I've been headhunted by the Fremantle Football Club and an attractive offer was put in front of me. I'm an AFL career coach. I have a young family, 3 children and a wife. They are my purpose. So as I sit here today, I hold my head high.
It comes to fruition, at least part of it, on Friday night when St Kilda and Fremantle meet. David King, Chris Grant, welcome.
Jared. Thanks, Jared.
What's your gut feel? Well, let me, just before you take a swing, we'll just roll some of the tweets we got last night as to how this is going to play out. And, you know, in a poll, it's sort of running, 100% one way. What do you think could and should occur?
Well, King, I'm of the opinion that that man, Ross Lyon, is giving St Kilda enormous service. He really has. 3 grand finals in 2 years. As of last night, I was thinking, nah, they won't do that. They won't. I think they might. I just think they might.
I agree with you, the service, and I always say that. Don't boo them, thank them for giving every inch of themselves for the success of that football team. But at the same time, they turn quickly. And if they're up by 10 goals at 3/4 time on Saturday and he's walking back through the race, they will give him everything they got.
You'd like to possibly see those that want to applaud him, applaud him. Those who've got nothing good to say, just sit quietly until he gets up to the box.
We're not at church, mate.
Well, reality is different to theory, isn't it?
Those that want to applaud him will get drowned out by those that don't. That's what's going to happen.
It's going to be a wrestling crowd, isn't
It's
it?
like going to the footy with Robbo and Mike Sheen. Have you ever done that?
No.
Have you?
The heckling on the way out. It's terrific.
What about, so that's the human theatre. What about the practicality? Because Ross Lyon's Saints had a stranglehold over Fremantle. They rendered them impotent in some of those games on an 8-game streak. What's the machinations like when the coach changes camps?
I think the thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is who he tags and who he doesn't tag. Because they're the players that ultimately he thinks, or he rates, that he thinks can swing the game or take the game in St Kilda's favour. Now, we know what he's going to do with Riewoldt. He gets the best defender, logically. But does he go for Montagna before Del Santo? Does he think he can stop Lenny Hayes? Does he lock up Sam Fisher off a half-back flank? How does he handle all that? Like, all those things I want to see. I want to see because it'll answer more questions about St Kilda than what we're seeing under their new coach.
Where does he send Ryan Crowley? Crowley's had a running withdrawal, I think, both weeks. Who would you expect Crowley to go to in the midfield? I've got my choice.
As of the Bulldogs game on the weekend, Lenny Hayes. Lenny Hayes was the starter for most of their...
It's hard to tag, though.
Very hard to tag, but you're asking me who would try and actually stop. He was the player who actually got them going. He was the one who, at the coalface, won it off almost his own boot.
You?
Look, Del Santo's creative.
No, you go for it. I would.
Really creative, and if you can stop that, if you think you can stop that, you do.
You send Crowley to Del Santo and you say, now listen here, Ryan, I want you to annoy the living crap out of Nick Del Santo. And he might not like it, Ross will say. He may not like it.
He might just say, you give them the same as what the crowd are going to give me. And we'll be all right.
It is going to be... the game's going to be fascinating, let alone the sideshow.
Yeah.
I think the game's going to be fantastic.
Agree.
The Nathan Fyfe scenario, we know that you can play with this sort of shoulder injury, and he did right through last year, but as Robbo rightly points out, the reconstructions lasted 2 weeks and there it is again. If he was your player, given what he means to the future, and Ross Lyon is locked in for the long term here, this is not about short-term gain, would you risk what's to come? Or do you pull up stumps now and have the surgery again?
It sounds like it is possibly an opportunity of continuing to play because his history shows that he can. My concern, and listening to you before we came on here, Kingy, the concern is what's it going to mean in 5 years' time? Adam Hunter played less than 150 games because of shoulders. And you just hope that this type of player who's exhilarating to watch and is really the future of where Fremantle would like to go. You just hope that it's not going to be one of those types of injuries after Rico and 2 games, he has to go through it again.
But the club doesn't look at... Surely the club doesn't think about what's going to happen in 5 years' time. You know, we look after player welfare.
No, I think they would. On this occasion, I think they would. I think he's that good a player and that important that they'll be looking at this as an injury of... We might have a player who's got a real chronic problem here.
But are they looking after them for themselves, or are they actually looking at it in a view to... We've actually got to look after Nathan Fyfe here, the person and player, because he's got a life to live after this. Are we putting his comfort of life in jeopardy by playing him?
I think they'll be looking at it both, but probably leaning a little bit towards we want him around for another 5 years. We want him around still in 5 years' time. So there's a list management perspective, King, I would have thought that they'd be looking at it and saying we want Nathan Fyfe around for a long time.
You get the best advice. And you listen to that advice, and ultimately the best surgeons in the land will tell the Fremantle Dockers what to do, and they'll follow that course. But I love the message from the player. I love it when a player says, "Look, I feel all right. Let's play." He did it last year for 21 weeks, as we were told earlier, which is terrific to hear. And I'll be surprised he doesn't do it again. It's going to be loose. We know it's going to be loose, but the way he plays for his size is out of proportion. He's a tough warrior, and I think it's a great time for the Freo Dockers.
Sorry, Jared. Players can be silly too. Players can want to play and push past and not be realistic about what their long-term future would be.
He's done it, hasn't he?
He's done it, but how many times can he do that? Like, he's done it once. Can he do it again and not cause himself long-term injury? It's a big question for the footy club.
There are things that amuse us and intrigue us, and this was one for you, where Ross Lyon was badgered in the post-match press conference about this, that gave the best answer he had, but we go and go and go.
And I've got to be careful because I'm no doctor. So there was a slight, not obviously, I think it's his reconstructed shoulder. It just slipped a little bit, and because he's so important to us, and we thought we were in control, well, there's certainly, and we had David Mundy ready to go, there was just no risk for him. If in analysis in the cold light of day he needs to be looked after and it means the season, we would tap him out. But if he's able to play on with no long-term risk to him, we would then take that pass. Look, I'm not being difficult, but I think I just said, I don't know, let us go away and assess. We'll put them to, I'll let the cobblers do the cobbling, so in this case we'll send him obviously to our doctor and the best surgeon and scanners in the state or the country, and you know we're quite optimistic though. Well, they're polar opposites. Yeah, play next week or the week after, or have surgery. I mean, it's pretty black and white, isn't it?
Oh, They pushed and they pushed and they pushed. I reckon he got 5 questions in a row. I know 360 is much-watched TV, but his press conferences are must-watch press conferences. They just asked the same question 5 times in a row with different wording.
But that's what we do sometimes to actually get to an answer. And in that case, probably harsh because he's done his shoulder.
Well, exactly.
Well, it's like his shoulder's done. Whatever way you want to put it in context, he's hurt his shoulder.
The Western Bulldogs, I thought you were just going to be no good, Granny, but I'm much relieved today to see that you are actually, you will be tanking. Even for we, the media, this is a world record tanking discussions in round 3. You are the football director at the Western Bulldogs, so I might ask you in an official capacity first how you reacted to the suggestion that in the second half of the year you will deliberately throw your games.
Look, as a person within the inner sanctum, of course, it's offensive. I mean, to be in round 3 and post round 3 to be thought that that's a possibility, I find it extraordinary that first it's brought up. I understand why it's brought up because it's an opportunity because of the rules that are in place. There is an opportunity there, but knowing Brendan and knowing what they're trying to achieve, he's a competitor, Brendan McCartney, a real competitor. He's not thinking about that, but I find it offensive as someone who's actually part of a group who's actually trying to achieve something, and to have that thrust in the paper today. You sort of read the article, it's not as offensive as it might sound, but I, as a person within the footy club, find it offensive, yeah.
Mark Stevens wrote the story. He's a Bulldogs supporter. Everyone who follows football and reads the paper would know that. Were you moved and offended so much to ring Steve-O, or anyone from the organisation to ring Steve-O about this?
No, and I must admit, I've only found out about getting here tonight, and Jared...
Is that why you're so angry?
No, not at all. No, not at all. But I just think that how can you be in a position where it's round 3 and you're contemplating what might happen at the end of round 24? I mean, it's extraordinary to even think about that it's been brought up within a football club. That's not strategic management to think that we could possibly even think about going down that path.
Melbourne wish it was good enough to deliberately throw games.
Well, they'd be happy to do that, wouldn't they?
Well, they've had practice.
They'd take that. They've had practice. It didn't work either. They lost Scully in the end anyway. But, look, I think it's too early to start throwing that sort of thing out, really. And I found it a nonsense article for me. And I think Steve-O's probably done himself a disservice writing that sort of stuff, because he's better than that. And I don't think... Clubs look at that, and we really listen to what reporters write. As much as they say players don't read papers, the first thing they do when they get the airport's buy a paper, see if their name's in it first. If it's not, then read the stories.
Sully asked me the other night why don't I put him in the best players in the Geelong Hawthorn game.
It's true. So you read that and you go, look, you know, I thought we were trying harder than that. And the Dogs certainly have. The first 2 rounds were solid. Weekend was a disaster, but they got a point to prove.
Can I ask one question to you, Granny? Brian Lake. If you were offended by the article today, you would have been, I suspect, differently offended by Brian's behaviour 5 minutes to go, 80 points down, now sitting this week in a very important game for this footy club.
I think he knows that. There's
no doubt.
I think he knows that. And I think his response throughout the course of this week has been pretty apologetic.
Does he address the group as a whole about it, or does he address the leaders, or he just let it go through to the group?
I think the leaders would have certainly brought it up. They have a leadership meeting every Monday. They would have spoken to him about it. You know what he's done a disservice to? He's done a disservice to the club in the fact that they've supported him. He's got back fit. They've given him every opportunity to get back and play really good footy, which has actually been going reasonably well. But he's also done himself a disservice because he's now not going to get that continuity in his game in the early part of the season.
Does he get fined or sanctioned or anything from the club or the players or the leaders? What's the penalty? Is there any penalty? Or?
Well, obviously he's not going to be playing for a couple of weeks.
That's the penalty, clearly from the judiciary. Yeah. But internally, is there any penalty? Or not?
I'm not aware of that, King.
Is that big enough a penalty, the suspension? I mean, that must hurt players when they're not playing. I mean, they train for 5 months of the year and they get told by a group of people, because you're stupid, that you're not playing. I would imagine that is a big enough penalty in footy.
I guess on it too, I don't mind the fact he actually was attempting to be aggressive, because I think from Brian's perspective, he's one of the core group of older statesmen within the team. We needed him back this year. We really needed him back this year after last year. And he's done some really good things over the course of pre-season and the early parts of the year to actually get himself up and going. I thought he was just trying to be aggressive and actually put his mark on that particular player, which is young Simpkin, but he just did it the wrong way.
OK, and